Awesome, everybody. I am so happy that you're here tonight. Tonight, we are going over engaging transitions. This is my contact information. If you need me after this presentation and you have questions that we don't answer here, please feel free to contact me. I prefer that you contact me by phone. Sometimes I don't get to see my email for 4 or 5 days, so it may take a while to respond to email. For the agenda tonight, I plan on going over several different pieces. I want to start with the need for transitions and who needs them, et cetera, et cetera. When I was asked to do this presentation last week, I sat there and I thought to myself, oh my God, I haven't thought about these things since grade school. Aren't these common knowledge things? And then I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to Kipling's Six Men, His Honest Men, and I'm going to sit there and use them. So these are the questions that I came up with, and this is what I'm going to be expecting to cover tonight. The speeches we have, they're plentiful. They're all over the place. Every Toastmaster has to make them. But what makes a speech from person A or speaker A more memorable than the speech from speaker B? It is all about your messaging and how that message is structured. It's not just the message, because if you just put the message out there in a haphazard way, the message gets lost. So it has to be structured and delivered properly. And this can only be done if you use creative ways for effective transitions in order to connect all the pieces together. When asked to build this type of training, I really thought about, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And I decided to go through the Honest Men Outlook. So the first one is, who needs transition? Now, we all learned in elementary school. Every single one of us went to elementary school, and we all learned that a good story requires a compelling beginning. You have that stuff in the middle, all the fluff, and then it has an end that wraps everything up. We even hear that same mantra here at Toastmasters. It's drilled into our heads. Beginning, middle, end. Beginning, middle, end. Have you ever asked yourself how to make all those pieces fit together? In grade school, it was clearly more than half a century ago for me. Oh my God, I'm such an old fart now. Either I forgot the lessons or my teachers sort of skipped that part. But transitions, the words, the phrases are often delicately positioned to give the story shape and to tug at the audience from one idea to the next. And this is what makes the story memorable. Similar to critical piece of engineering. Now, I'm an engineer. I don't know how many other people on the call happen to be engineers, but transitions should not be an afterthought. And let's face it, if you wanted to, you can always cement rocks together and pile them up, but you're not going to have that bridge that gets you over and across the river. You'll just have a pile of rocks. So pulling off the seamless transitions, these things that elude some of the best speakers and the best writers around the world, because they seem to be formulaic. They they come across as forced and not, how do I want to do it? Maybe patronizing a little bit. They're not used with finesse. And if we don't use them with finesse, they can certainly give away the punchline, and they can make your story seem sort of repetitive, no matter where you are, no matter how many times that you do them. So when transitions are ineffective or they are lacking altogether, your audience is going to lose the thread of your story. They may feel jarred from one paragraph to the next and one section to the next and jumping all over the place. and it's going to make them lose your message. Your 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 transitions need to be in the right place at the right time in order to make your speech or your story effective the way you want it to do. Right. So based on that, you can tell that the function of a transition in any story, it is what glues all those different ideas together. You may have 4 or 5 different ideas throughout a 5 or 10 minute speech, and each one of those pieces all get glued together with transitions. The goal is to convey the information in a clear and concise manner. And transitions will allow you to establish those logical connections between all these different ideas, between your sentences, your paragraphs, or even sections of your story if you're giving a keynote story. Transitions will tell the audience what to do with the information you are giving them as you present it to them. It doesn't matter whether your transitions are single words, quick phrases, or even full sentences. They all function as signs that tell the audience how to think, organize, and react to the different ideas that is being presented.
Hey, Jim, I hate to bother you. So it is this, are you just saying in between sections of a speech, you say something that has them move from one section to the next? Is that what you mean by transitions?
It has their thought processes moving from one to the next. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Back to you. Sorry.
Sure. So transitions, just based on what you were just talking about, how the transitions are signals of relationship between the ideas. Right.
Okay.
It moves you from one piece to the next. They provide the audience with directions for how to piece all these different ideas together into a logical, coherent argument. The transitions are not just verbal decorations that are out there. They don't just embellish your paper by making it sound real better. They are words with particular meanings. And these meanings tell the reader or tell the audience what to think, how to react in a particular way to the idea that you as the speaker are presenting. And when you provide the audience with these important cues, they help the audience understand the logic of how your ideas all fit together. Since the clarity and the effectiveness of your transitions will depend greatly on how well you organize your paper. There's some tips that you could be doing, right? So you may want to evaluate your paper's organization even before you start writing the transition and putting the pieces in. You do the outline, and in the margins of your outline or of your draft, you summarize in one word or a real short phrase what each paragraph is about, right? So you get that one word or that one phrase that clicks the idea of what the information in that paragraph is. And the exercise itself will help you see the order and the connection between your different ideas as you're flowing down the paper as you're reading what you're getting ready to speak. After you do this, if you find that you still have difficulty linking your ideas in some sort of coherent fashion, the problem may not be the transitions. It may be that you have the order wrong, and you may have to readjust the order in order to make the transitions work. There were a couple of speakers at our earlier meeting today, and we were teaching them how to write the speech in 5 minutes. And we went through the whole exercise, and they put the pieces down, and then a couple of them got stuck. when they were given their speech. They got stuck and they didn't know how to fit the transitions into place because the order of what they put was not in the correct order to begin with. So the organization of your written work, there should be two elements, right? Even before you give the speech, there should still be two elements that are sitting in your head. The order in which you choose to present the different parts of your discussion or your argument, and then the relationships that you want to construct between those parts. The transition cannot substitute for good organization, no matter what you do with it. It's transitions isn't going to substitute for the organization. They can make your organization clearer and easier to follow and logically present to the audience. But if your organization is not in the right order to begin with, it's going to be lost. So one way to effectively organize your arguments or organize your paragraphs or papers or however it is that you're doing would be to prevent or present your conventional view first, and then after that, present your critical response to that view. So you always have some sort of compare and contrast going on. If we wanted to look at that in terms of paragraphs, so you're getting ready to write your speech, and in paragraph A, you would enumerate all the reasons that someone might consider point A. And then in paragraph B, you would refute those points in order to give a well-rounded argument. The transitions that would establish the logical connections between these two key elements would indicate to the listener or to the audience that the information in paragraph B contradicts the information in paragraph A. So when you do that transition itself makes the thought process self-evident. The types of transitions that are available to you are very diverse, as the circumstances in which you may want to use them. So a transition can be a single word, it can be a phrase, it can be a sentence. If you're doing a keynote speech, it could be an entire paragraph. In each case, it all functions the same way. The transition either directly summarizes the content of the preceding sentence, paragraph, or section, or it implies such a summary by reminding the reader of what is to come beforehand. Then it tells the reader by doing that, it tells the reader to anticipate or comprehend the new information in the manner of which you are presenting it.
Mm.
So there are three different times that you would want to use them. You have the transitions between sections. Now this is probably in longer works. I keep referring to like keynote speeches. It may be necessary to include transitional paragraphs rather than just sentences in order for the reader to take the information that they're absorbing and put it into a specific relevance to the next section that's coming up. Of course, then you can always have the transition between paragraphs. If you've done a good job of arranging the paragraphs in the correct order to begin with, so that the content leads from one logical idea to the next, then the transitions will highlight those relationships. You've already put them together, they already exist, and it will highlight it by summarizing the previous paragraph or summarizing the suggestion of the content. A transition between paragraphs can be a word or two or can be the first sentence. I remember in English classes that they would always tell you in the first sentence of the next paragraph, you should be referring back to the previous paragraph so that you can connect the two thought processes together. You can also have transitions inside a paragraph. Just like you have between different sections and different paragraphs, transitions inside paragraphs act as cues to help the readers to anticipate what is coming before they read it. Even within paragraphs, transitions tend to be single words. Now, I went through all of this stuff and I had all these things going on, and you're probably wondering, what are some examples for transitions?
That was a great one, Jim.
Because there's reasons and there's spots and there's ways to make them happen. And you don't have to write all these down. I will just drop a copy of this inside the chat room, so you have a copy of the slides. But here's what you have. These are different things and different situations where you can use them. And I know that when we first started with the thought process last week, we wanted to get away from things like first, second, and third, next, then, and finally, which we use when we do sequences. But you know, if you're going to be finessing it a little bit, maybe you can do it in a different way. I really like to see the exception and the contrast going on. So you can use such words like but, however, in spite of. A lot of people want to talk about positions because you always talk about where cars were or where objects were. So you talk about being above or next to or below or over the hill. Or, you see what I mean? You see how the different pieces are there? So you don't have to memorize all of these. You don't have to write them down. I'm just going to drop this into the chat room for everybody. I am now going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to open this up for questions and answers. Anybody? Hi, Reggie. I didn't see you come in. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well, sir. What part of the lecture did you come in on?
I started in the beginning.
Okay, good, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a difficulty in getting into Zoom because I don't know the password. I have to go to my emails, from then log into the website, and then from there. I don't know what is still the password, but when I click it there, it will come directly joins the meeting.
Okay, good for you.
Thank
Got
you.
it. Awesome job. Okay, so everyone's been here for the whole thing. I'm sorry that we had invited the people from the earlier Toastmasters meeting today to come to this meeting to hear about transitions because they had some issues, but unfortunately they didn't show up. So I guess it was too late at night or something. However, questions? Anybody?
Did you get a chance to drop that in the chat room, Jim? don't
I
see
will
it.
do that. Yes.
Can you give some examples of a transition in a speech?
Hold on 1 second. The chat room. This is the chat room. Okay. Okay, it's loading up in the chat room.
Thank you.
All right. What were you asking, Reg?
Can you give an example of a transition? When we are talking in a speech, or when you are engaging in a speech.
What's give me a sample of something you want to connect together. We had several samples in this presentation already. So
So say right now, when we're talking right now, if
sure.
I want to introduce a in a transition, how to do that?
Well, you don't introduce transitions, right? Transitions are used to connect different ideas together. So if you have idea A in your speech, and then you have idea B in your speech, and you want to talk about how one goes to the next, that would be the transition that you're using.
Okay, got it. So that means the idea, when you are ending the idea and the beginning of the next idea, that you give summarize the earlier one.
Correct.
And then, so that's the transition.
That's the transition. Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure I understand. So you start out, you figure out your speech. Yeah, you have your points that you want to make and everything else.
Yep.
You organize those points into some kind of sequence, and then you go look at in between each point, what would be an appropriate transition that would have them flow from what you just said to where you're about to go.
Correct.
That's the whole purpose.
Correct.
And then once you've done that, then you can go through this list that you presented and say, okay, then here on this one, I'm going to say, for example,
Yes.
On the next one, I'm going to say, but above that is, right. It's like, so this actually is a really easy thing. We're just
Yes.
trying to keep them flowing and not going, what the hell just happened?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So you've been in Toastmasters enough that
Yeah.
you've seen people get up there, start speaking, and all of a sudden they go off on one tangent here, then another tangent here, then another tangent here, and they're going like this, right? Instead of going straight up the line, right? So any time that a speaker goes like this and jumps from story to story, it gets confusing and loses the point. There's the emphasis that I always try to make when people are doing stories is you have one key point that you want to get across. So you make that key point as your conclusion. And then you go backwards. So you have this conclusion, then you go backwards and you figure out how did you get to that conclusion. So you have 2 or 3 paragraphs or whatever, 2 or 3 ideas that go backwards. And then you have the introduction. So you always write the speech backwards. Well, at least I do.
It's definitely a way to do it. And I understand that. I think there's times where you're gonna get the first part and then you have to figure out the second. There's time where you start at the end and go to the beginning. But so I'm looking at these words, Jim, and it's like, so each one of these would basically turn into a sentence, right? So
Yes.
It's like, right. So if I was going to say, we're going to go from one example to another one, instead of just telling it so it sounds like it's part of the previous story, we say, and let me give you a second example, and here's another example, right? It's just that easy.
Yes.
And because of that, people then know they're all connected, or
Correct.
you're okay.
Correct. So
Right.
when you're using something like another example, that tells the audience that you're talking about 2 similar things.
Right.
If you say, let me give you a different idea, then that tells the audience that they're contrasting things.
Right. Or you could use something like, however, some people think that, and then
Yes.
go to the, yes. Okay. Got it.
Right.
Got it. So all of these, we're just looking for, it's like for the words that you have listed here actually point to, all right, you're going to say one of these, and then you just need to put it into a full sentence that just makes it easy for people to not get lost.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's
And
good.
the more finesse you put into it, the easier it is for the logic to be followed.
Yes. And so, Jim, I'm really glad that you did this tonight, because I just did a speech about 2 weeks ago where afterwards the evaluator said, I really loved what you were saying about all these things. And then we got to this point where it was like, it felt like you were given a different speech.
Hmm.
And what I realized when you were talking about this tonight was I just didn't put a transition before I went to that second example.
Yep. So there was no connection.
No connection.
And it just bounced.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So, all right, cool.
Jim, question, Vivian here.
Yes, Vivian.
When we're doing, for example, 3-hour seminars, how often are we able, or should we use transitions so they don't get tired of hearing it? Meaning, if it's PowerPoint in the background, oh, that's easy. Just change the color or put the heading. But when it's conversational, like in a talk show, like, oh my gosh, right? So it's enough that I might be incoherent, the guest is incoherent. What is the best way? What's your suggestion on how to use transitions when it's live conversational with an incoherent guest? No kidding.
If you're talking live, let's just assume you're talking on a radio, right? So you're being like a radio host of some sort. When we're talking, if the audience or the person on the other end is jumping to conclusions, you're going to have a conversation that bounces all over the place. And if you want to keep the conversation steered in one direction, then it's going to be up to the host that wants to steer it to come up with something that brings the other person back in line. Right? So you don't want to transition there, you want to bring them back in. And when it comes to the point where you want to change topics, then you would come up with a different type of a transition. And you could say, well, let's move on to B instead of we're talking about A. We've been talking about A for so long. Let's move on to B. And
that's a good,
yeah, that itself will move the conversation in the direction that you want and transition over to the new subject.
Thank you, Jim. That's so helpful because you know this, my topics are generally mental health and right? You can imagine what the first, no kidding, especially, no kidding. And they're talking about anxiety. And you know what it's like trying to have a decent conversation with someone who has anxiety disorder. It's a challenge. So yes, we are just going to have to cut them with finesse. Very well said. Thank you.
Welcome.
I have a thought on that. One of the things I've seen a lot of times is the person who's the host, like you, would maybe just sum up or say, you know, we have other people who've just joined us, so let me just kind of reset. Here's what we were talking about. Or,
sure.
So, you know, have you guys been on Clubhouse? Jim, have you ever been on that?
No.
It's basically, it's like Twitter for audio.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they do all the time is about once every 4 speakers in a row, they'll say, all right, let's just reset the room. Here's our purpose this evening, blah, blah, blah. This is what we're talking about. Who has an idea? So just a thought.
Sure. If you're going to do things that take hours to do, like you're talking about a show that can be 4 or 5 hours long.
Right.
That's not a bad idea to reset the room.
Yeah. So when I'm doing like at least twice a week, I do 1.5 hour long classes. And I'm either doing them on Zoom or I'm doing them on the phone. When I do them on the phone, I make sure that I have a handout so that everybody can see where we're going and they know exactly what's coming up next. But still, even in that case, I need to use more of what you just presented tonight. I need to make it really clear. Here's why we're going to this next thing, that kind of thing. So, yeah. So I'm glad we did this, Jim.
Awesome. I'm glad it's of some help to you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Yes. How about having a conversation with someone who wants an argument? We want a conversation. The other side wants an argument. We can barely get a word in edgewise, and when we do, they're still screaming. How do we handle people like that without strangling them or shooting them on screen?
You let them keep talking.
Oh, Jim, trust me, when you're in mental health, they can talk for 3 days and 2 nights. I kid you not. Please.
Let them talk.
Jim,
if they're looking for an argument, either you have one of 3 choices. You can either let them talk, you can argue, or you can control the situation and move it in the direction that you want it to go in.
And if they're
Those are your
if
three
their appoint
choices.
Jim, let's say their appointment is 1 hour and someone's coming in for the next hour. And
Uh-huh.
then what happens when the hour's over? They say, hey, I'm not yet finished. You know what I'm saying? And we weren't
Sure.
able to serve them.
It
There are a lot of people like this.
Sure, it's okay. I know that we're not finished. You're scheduled to come back in 2 days,
Exactly.
so we'll pick up in 2 days where we left off here. No problem.
Okay, so that's fine. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sure.
Vivian, you've got to be really good at this. You've been doing it a lot, haven't you?
Yes, but there's always room to improve because I'm not getting personal here, but it's a challenge when you're faced with anxiety, panic attack, and a bipolar having a bad day. Because sometimes I cannot move them to another day because seriously, some are suicidal. So
Yeah.
it gets dangerous. Seriously, this is not a bunch of funny questions. I'm in a very dangerous field.
Yes.
Really.
I don't know much about anxiety and that type of stuff, but I do know that bipolar is a problem.
Yes.
And if they're not on meds, it's really, really bad. Because they can flip from depressed to manic instantaneously.
And some are violent, Jim. Seriously.
Yes, of course. You become manic. You're very violent. You have no control over anything.
I'll give you an example. This is going on recording, and people should should know. I'm helping somebody. She's 34. She's single. Very bipolar, but very, very, very intelligent. She's a genius in IT, except when she forgets her meds or sleeps beyond sleeping hours. So that's the scenario, but she's fine on meds. She wakes up to screaming and hollering from the living room. She steps out of her bedroom. This is a true story. What does she see? Her dad strangling her mom. Now just think of that. These are the cases I handle, like, and then she calls me. So how do I tell her, see you next week? Like, really violent stuff, scary.
Yes.
And I want to help them. Yeah, I want to help them the best that I can. Maybe I'll tell them, how about call later at the end of, office hours, and I'll give you 30 minutes, something like that. But I
Sure.
cannot tell them to go away because think what she can do to her dad. So that gets really sticky, right?
Sure. Yeah, you at that point, you got a new client coming in. You have to let her know that I have a new client. They have to be handled the same way that you are. They have time just like you do. So either you can wait till I finish with the client. I have some open time. You can come back, or we can talk over the phone or something. You don't want to throw them away, right? Because
Yes.
especially bipolar. If you throw bipolar away, they're going to go off the wall. You always need to leave them an opening.
Yes, thank you. So at least I know I'm giving it my best shot. I think what I learned is to just let them know that I care. Because if we just say, see you next week, it really hurts them, really.
Yeah.
And that's why you hear me say, contrary to who cares or I don't care, I really have to say, I care, let's stay connected. This really, it saves lives. Seriously, it saves lives. Those two words, I care.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Nadine, May, Lolita?
Well,
Hearing, okay.
my question is, well, when you said the transition should be on the first sentence of the next paragraph, I usually kind of summarize my last sentence of my paragraph, summarizing what I said in the paragraph. And then when I get to the next paragraph, I kind of try to transition, but sometimes I don't do it successfully.
That maybe what you need to do is take the last sentence of the previous paragraph and make that the first sentence of you. So it transitions.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So when you're structuring paragraphs, getting ready for speech, and you're structuring them one after the other, each sentence is a logical thought. Each paragraph is a connections of a logical thought. So when you go to paragraph 2, you need to be able to transition from logical thought to logical thought. So the first sentence summarizes the previous paragraph and sets you up for the new paragraph. So it connects both paragraphs.
Oh, yeah, got it, Jim. I have one question too.
Sure.
So when we're connecting, we can use the words like a so, like, but. So when we're connecting them, so
If you're using those words, you need to use them properly. If you're going to use the word like, that means you're doing a comparison of something. You can't just say, well, like, I want to do this. That's the wrong use of the word like.
I see.
When you use the word like, you're going to compare it. It's the apple was as red as red like a tomato or something like that, right? So you want to make a comparison when you use the word like. And when you use the word so, if you cannot replace it with the word therefore, then you're using the word so incorrectly. So indicates cause and effect.
So you're saying so isn't a transition. It's like saying or most of the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my question. I'm not sure if you guys talked about, I'm sorry if I missed that, but because we're always so picky about filler words and it's so hard to like specify, is it a filler word or is it transition? And I know that there's, like you said, you take a full sentence, but I noticed on the sheet there were some so's and some und likes, and I was like, oh. So how do we know we're not using filler words by accident?
When you use them properly, they're okay.
When is
But
it proper? Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
When
they
you
make sense.
yeah, if it makes sense. Right? So when you say, I love this so much, right? That's a good use of the word so. If you're going to use so at the beginning of a sentence, you should be able to replace it with the word therefore. If you cannot, then it's not a good use of the word. So at the beginning of the sentence is very hard to do unless you're using therefore. And if you could do that, then just use the word therefore.
I need to wear bright yellow so that Jim can see me.
Yes, yes, that's a cause and effect. That's a proper use.
Jim, question.
Yes.
When we're wrapping up with something like, so if you want to lose weight, try walking 30 minutes a day. And then
Therefore, if you want to lose weight, walk 30 minutes a day.
I agree. And yet millennials and Gen Z, they go like, see, when talking to young people, they don't like however, therefore, they don't like words with too many letters.
Well, they don't talk properly either, so.
Yeah.
But they're the audience, right? I mean, I'm training tech people in the audience, so becomes acceptable, I guess. Speaking the language of the audience. They say, oh my God, you sound so old, long words.
There are times when you want to speak the language of the audience, and there are times when you want to speak English.
You could also say that's why, or like if you like, I don't know, I feel like you don't have to. Because I'm training myself to get rid of that so, because I have
Nice
So,
one.
so.
so,
And I feel like if you're like a good, if you, I don't think you have to 100% speak like the youth people speak, because I don't know, I feel like that's maybe also weird. Like,
yeah, it is.
I don't know.
It,
Like if you sound better than me, I even look up more to you than if you're speaking like I'm speaking. If doesn't make sense. So yeah, I don't know. It's just from my 2 cents. So
Nadine, I'd like to address it. Nadine, remember, you know where I'm coming from. English is not the primary language. Then there are millennials and Gen Z. Ah,
I feel you.
oh boy, it's a challenge. And of course, there's the age difference. And then they say, oh my God, she sounds like an old school principal, right? Like, okay.
Well, I can
Well,
tell you that you don't. So,
thank
so
you.
there we go again.
therefore,
Therefore,
Ah, Jim, let's have Nadine as president. Oh, here's a challenge. Deliver a humorous speech using as many transitions as you can.
That's 2 challenges. Making a humorous speech and making as many transitions. It's like 2.
Oh.
I don't know how to be funny, so it's usually when I try, it goes backwards. So and there's my
have-
soul again. So, anyways,
Nadine, the universe sent it to you. I'm an improv performer. Get in touch. Let's do this.
all
Let's
right.
make everyone laugh in this room. Yeah, why not? It's not about being perfect. Your intent is to be funny. And our intent is to delight Jim with as many transitions as possible. Hal will document it, turn into a movie. Reggie's going to make sure everyone in this country is able to watch it. May and Lalita are going to say, and we have to document this.
okie dokie. Let me go ahead and stop recording here and we will end our session.